So here we are. Welcome, viewers of to the Center Wellington booth. This is Mike Nagy doing one of our live interview series. Today we have Ward 3 Councillor Bob Foster. And these series are designed to give direct access to the public and to learn more about our people in our community, the issues, without any filters, to just sort of allow people to get to know one another as well and talk about things openly. So these will be going on regularly. And next week, I hope to do one on food security and food areas with Chris Jess and hopefully Anita Stewart and some others that I'm lining up. But today we've got Bob Foster. Very happy to have you on today, Bob, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
And so if you could just start off, the most important thing that we want to do here is to people to get to know you better and to get to know the people we interview better. So just talk about your growing up, your childhood, things that interested you. Just give some background so people know where you came from and you know, what you like and some of your interests.
Yes, Mike. I was born and raised right here in Fergus, and grew up here, played sports here, went to high school here. My father was a veterinarian, and that meant going out to visit farms and farmers. And after we would do some veterinary work, often we would have maybe a cup of coffee in the farm kitchen, and there was always these amazing and wonderful discussion. And that's probably where I first got interested in public affairs generally, and in politics, and in local government. And I attended Wilfrid Laurier University, took the Bachelor of Business Administration program there, and I really enjoyed that. And
what are your interests? What are some of the things that you'd like to do as a kid and that you've maybe brought forward as an adult? Some of your personal interests, hobbies, or things that you like to keep up to date on, those sort of things, or participate with?
Well, as you know, Mike, Fergus and Elora are big lacrosse towns, and lacrosse was very, very popular, and I played a lot of lacrosse, really enjoyed it. And I still play in a men's league called the Masters League, which is that's a euphemism for old timers.
Right.
And we play a modified version of lacrosse where it's you know, it's running and passing, but there's no none of the heavy checking. So it's rather like playing basketball, but it's a running game.
Yes.
And as you know, or as some may not know, that lacrosse is part of the culture of the Six Nations of the Grand River.
Yes.
And that's one of my interests, having played lacrosse, you know, with natives and against natives. It's a scholarly interest of mine. Native Canadians and lacrosse, and how it was a gift to Europeans here in the Grand River Valley, and it's a big part of our communities.
I believe it's actually one of Canada's official sports, whereas most people think hockey is, and I believe it's lacrosse, not hockey.
Well, it's both.
It's
the national summer sport being lacrosse, national winter sport is hockey.
I grew up in Hamilton, and I had some friends that coached lacrosse and youth, and they were always terrified of playing against Fergus and Elora.
Yeah, we're always strong, and
you
know, even today we're still very, very strong for a small community. We have both a junior B and a junior C lacrosse team, and we have boys and girls playing in every age group. Right from little children, 4 and 5 years old, right up to, and there's still a men's league here as well.
Wow. So let's just talk about what motivated you to get involved with the local politics, because I'll rhyme off some of the reasons. It must have been the money, must have been for the fame. It must be for, you know, all the great thanks you get all the time. You must love those late night phone calls about dogs and police services or whatever else. So which one of those really motivated you to get involved with local politics?
Well, I do love those calls, actually, Mike. I really do. It's very important to me to work for my hometown and to work for the citizen. And those calls are an important part of that. I think it's really, really important to me to take those calls, because I see my role as representing the citizen and representing Ward 3, and I can't do that if I don't hear from the citizen. So I enjoy those calls.
Yeah, for sure. I was just, but what was the
And just for
initial
the,
motivations for you to really get involved, I guess, is where I'm going with.
yes, yes.
Certainly it
And
wasn't, yeah.
I've had a lifelong interest in history and geography and public affairs generally.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worked for the government of Canada for about 15 years in budget administration and accounting and financial management. And so I've always had a lifelong interest in politics generally and in public affairs. My grandma Grace was a big influence on me. She was a teacher, and she lived here in Fergus. She moved here rather when she retired. She was from Flamborough Township, actually. Mike, you mentioned Hamilton.
Yeah.
She thought Hamilton was the best place because she was from the Flamborough area. But nevertheless, she moved here when I was a boy, and she was very, very interested as well in politics and in government and in public affairs. And she was an inspiration to me to get involved and to work for the betterment of your community. And that's really my motivation. It's all about the citizen, and it's all about hometown service.
Right.
Making things better.
So she taught you about volunteerism and giving back, and
yes,
obviously,
yes. She moved to Fergus. She moved to Fergus because my mother was my mother's mother. Mm-hmm. And when she moved to Fergus, she really didn't know a soul. And I watched her in the 70s as a boy get involved in the community, serve the community, work for various organizations, blood donor clinic, the hospital, her church, all kinds of other things, including, I could probably say she was a very staunch conservative. And so she was very, very interested in, this is the era of Mr. Trudeau Sr. I vividly recalled the postal strikes in the 70s, and I once picked my grandma up to take her out for coffee, and as she was coming down the stairs of her apartment, the mailman was coming up the stairs, and I was helping her down, and she tore a strip off that mailman because of the third or the fourth postal strike in the late 70s, early 80s. Yep. I know some will remember those years. But that, it just struck me how she made the point how important public services were and are, and that really struck me in those days as a teenage boy.
So her strong will, independent, speaking her mind had a big influence.
Yes, yes, and working for the better good. Yes,
and not easy for women always. It's been difficult for women.
That's right.
In politics and life in general, it's harder, and we know that. It's been so back in the 70s. There was a lot of barriers too for women. Still, big, huge barriers.
And she was one of the women who came of age when women did not have the right to vote in Canada. She was born in 1898, so living through the First World War period, the woman was earning the vote or receiving the vote as they ought to have. And she lived through that and would talk to me about that.
Wow, that would be a huge influence.
And my dad also was very influential, very interested in the community as a veterinarian, serving the community and working for hometown organization. He was involved with the skating club. He was president of the Fergus Skating Club, president of the Fergus Thistles, the senior lacrosse club at one time. Very, very involved with the Royal Canadian Legion. He was also a veteran serving in the liberation of Holland in the Second World War. So, we would talk about these things, and these are some of the roots of how I became very interested in public affairs and in politics.
Well, so clearly, you are standing on a strong foundation of example that was put before you by people.
I think so, yeah, yes, definitely.
So, this wasn't just a whim. It wasn't just that. You obviously, this was a slow build from your childhood and up, and had some great examples.
Yes.
So,
well,
that's great, Bob. That's I'm sure there's so many people that will watch this, and even people that know you that probably didn't even know some of those stories. So that's really important.
I hope they're interesting.
So tell me quickly, how do you think? What do you think the role of a municipal council really should be? Tell me what you think an ideal service looks like for just council in general as a team or what have you?
Well, the Municipal Act lays out our duties, Mike, and
Yep.
and two of the most important things, the first and foremost is to represent the public. That's our representative function. And that's one of our most important things, is to bring the voice of the citizen to the table, the taxpayer to the table. And the second really key point is to provide oversight of the municipal government and what staff's recommending and what's providing oversight on the budget. And those are two really important matters. And that's why I was very much opposed to delegating those important responsibilities to the CAO. You may recall in April we did that, and we did it just 2 or 3 days after the province gave municipalities in Ontario the right to meet electronically, virtually, or via teleconference. And just 2 days later, rather than meeting virtually or electronically, we delegated those powers to the CAO. And I find that unacceptable, quite frankly, Mike. The province gave us the right to meet virtually for a reason. They amended the Municipal Act to allow it, and we really ought to be meeting. And I've been very vocal about that. Right. We should be meeting frequently. We should be meeting more frequently rather than less frequently, or delegating our important functions to the CAO.
And what primary concerns do you have of that concentration of responsibility with the CAO? Which areas are of concern do you have most with some of the decisions that could be made?
My biggest concern, Mike, is that, on the budgetary side, we effectively gave the CAO a blank check to spend the 2020 budget as they saw fit. Now, I realize the pandemic is an emergency and it's a different time, but the CAO can now spend the 2020 budget with no council oversight whatsoever, and that concerns me greatly. We also ended 2019 with a surplus of approximately $700,000. And after we delegated our powers, and after the CAO was given those powers, we then allocated that surplus to be used for the emergency. And I don't make light of the emergency, but it troubles me that we're not providing the oversight and we're not representing the public because we're not meeting frequently.
Are you getting reports back, some information back on some of this decisions on the spending that you're able to look at even in retrospect?
We're not getting fulsome reports. Now, it's been undertaken that we will in the future, but it may be too little too late in my view. Once the horse is out of the barn, there's no use closing the barn door.
That's correct. Yeah.
Actually, there is a use, but I mean, it's just too late, right?
Yeah, it is. It's too late. So what sort of expenditures do you think that could be of concern? Development charges or what? There's a myriad of type of budget decisions that could be made that affect, which ones in particular would be concern to you that you think that would be a realistic item that is being decided upon that you're not hearing about until after?
Well, there are many, and one of the biggest to me is in 2019 we allocated $600,000 to do a study on a new works garage, and I noted at the time that not only had we allocated the monies for the study in 2020, it was that's the current operating year. We also allocated a $6 million item in 2021 to actually build the garage. And it begs the question, what's the point of, if you're already budgeting to replace the garage, what's the point of hiring a consultant to study whether or not you should replace the garage? It was a foregone conclusion that that was the intention. And not only that, Mike, we're going to borrow the money to do it. And so we currently have 4 garages, and we were never prevented with complete information. The study looked only at the option of replacing or rebuilding the Fergus garage. It never really looked at the other options, one of which would have been to do nothing. And it makes no sense to me in a large, geographically large community to not operate out of all 4 garages, one in Pilkington, one in Elora, one in Fergus, and one in West Garifraxa. We have 4 garages. We have scarce resources. And it troubles me that we would even consider hiring a consultant to study and assess our needs for space, and then to already have budgeted to actually replace the Fergus space with borrowed money. The money could be far better spent on other things. And I don't think we should borrow to replace 1 garage when we have 4 garages already.
So that's a very good tangible.
Well, that's just one.
That's a very good tangible example of where
Yes.
you wish council could have had input on that decision directly.
Yes, we were only presented. We were never given complete information and sufficient information. And when I studied at Laurier, we would look at when we do a business case analysis, you look at all options. One option is to do nothing. One option would be to renovate the old garage. One option is to build a brand new garage. Those are all options. And we really only looked at the option of building a new garage. And using borrowed money to do it, I think, is a terrible, terrible decision. And
let me ask you a question directly to that. Based on what I'm hearing, do you think there's enough talent and brain power on council to make that decision without a consultant?
Absolutely there is. Completely there is. And we also have excellent staff.
Yes. I'm sorry not to include the staff, of course.
We have some of the best snowplow guys, the roads folks, the water. This would be primarily for the roads area, and snowplowing is a very important function in Fergus and Elora.
And some of these employees have a long lineage with the township and other townships, so they know the history and they understand the operations better than often a consultant would. Is what I'm hearing.
We have good foremen, good leaders, good people driving, and I don't understand why a group of highly skilled people could not make a decision about what kind of garage was needed or whether or not to replace one or build one or keep 4. I'm astonished that we need to hire a consultant to tell us what kind of garages we need. It's quite frankly ridiculous, Mike, in my view.
Yeah.
We've got some of the best staff, and yet when it's time to make a decision, we defer a consultant, and I think that's a bad thing.
So what I'm hearing loud and clear on this example is that you feel council's muted and handcuffed here a lot with this current situation we're in, and that we should be taking advantage of Zoom meetings and live meetings more. So that,
absolutely.
And how often would you like to see council meeting virtually through their homes?
We should meet at least weekly, or definitely 3 or 4 times, 3 times a month minimum. Our procedural bylaw, I have a copy right here, Mike, and it states council should meet on the first Monday of each month of the year and on the third Monday of each month of the year. So that's twice a month, right out of our procedural bylaw, Mike, and we're not doing that. And given an emergency, we ought to be meeting even more frequently. That bylaw refers to an absolute minimum of twice monthly. And we should and could be meeting more frequently.
Right.
I would say, to give you a short answer, Mike, at least weekly, given the pandemic and given the emergency. And
I think it would be safe to say if you met more frequently, the meetings would be shorter and you could deal with urgent items and move on. I know some of these council meetings go on for a very long period of time. So I'm just curious to hear your observations on the length of some of the meetings and sort of how they're run and the ability to speak at the meetings. Can you give me some observations on how you feel your participation and other councillors during these meetings?
Do you mean virtually, Mike, in the last little while, or in general?
both, actually. I'm talking both from when they were in-person meetings to now virtually, both.
Well, we have met a couple of times virtually in the last 3 months, and the meetings virtually have been really, really good, really effective. The technology works well. Um, it's been very, very good and functioning as it should with discussion and information and so on. In general, though, Mike, I would have to say that we need to improve our debate and our the council is a place for rigorous debate, and I can give you a couple of examples. I have questioned staff about various matters, including our bridge levy and the percentage of it, and my questions have been ruled out of order by the head of council, and I think that's a problem. Council is the place where rigorous debate should occur, and I cannot see why that question was ruled out of order. Secondly, in light of the pandemic, I made a motion that we review our 2020 budget. We know that we've lost a lot of our revenue from the arena, from various other sources. We've given everyone the ability to defer their tax payments and their sewer and water payments. And so you've got a major hit to your revenue.
Yes.
And yet my motion to take another look at the 2020 budget was deemed to be out of order. And you could bog down in procedural arguments about order, but the bottom line to me, Mike, is we have a serious revenue problem, and we ought to, it's an obvious thing that if you have a hit to your revenue, you have to take a second look at your expenditures. And COVID-19 has shaken things up completely. All the assumptions we made in December of 2019 are out the window because of COVID-19. And I'm astonished that we're not looking at our budget.
So Bob, when there's a decision made that a question or motion is out of order, seems to be no recourse to challenge that decision, or how does that work?
Well, we have a procedural bylaw and Robert's Rules of Order, which I did not write, by the way. They're an old
they've been around for hundreds of years.
Reference regarding rules of order. And yes, those things matter, and motions need to be appropriate. That's true, but you also need to look at the spirit and intent of what's being proposed and why. And in this case, and I believe we were talking about our budget at the time when I made the motion, and so it was really a motion to amend, and that's fully acceptable procedurally. And without bogging down into procedural arguments, I think it's very important to consider what was the reason for the motion. And the reason was COVID-19 shaking up and changing and reducing our revenue. And therefore, it was simple to me that we have to look at our expenses. And I'm astonished that would be ruled out of order. And we still, other councillors, Councillor McAway, Councillor Kittredge as well, has asked to relook at the budget, and we're not doing that in 2020. And I think that's a recipe for failure financially. Just take lacrosse alone, Mike. Lacrosse and hockey. Our total taxation is about $15 million, and our total the revenue from user fees, that's the fees you pay to go swimming or to play hockey or to rent an hour of ice time or an hour of floor time. In April, or March and April rather, we lost about 6 weeks of hockey in Center Wellington, and it's way over $1 million in lost revenue. That money's not coming back.
That's right.
In May, the Ontario Lacrosse Association canceled lacrosse in Zone 8. So that's dozens and dozens of teams who have a practice weekly and one or two games weekly. And we're talking about $1 million in lost revenue from lacrosse. So now that's $2 million. And then there's many, many dollars from lost festivals, the rent that's paid to use Bissell Park,
Yes,
for
I'm
Riverfest,
yep,
the Highland
Riverfest.
Games, the Fall Fair, all those things. Nobody's having a wedding. A Saturday night dance is a $2,000 rent for the town.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've lost all of that revenue. And I've asked about this, and I have never been given a straight answer as to the total revenue lost. Having an accounting background, Mike, I have calculated it to be well into the $2.5 to $3 million, and that's just from the arenas and parks. There's another 3 million potentially. I heard yesterday on the news that 7 million Canadians have applied for and are receiving the CERB benefit. That means 7 million Canadians are out of work. That's 7 out of about 30. It's roughly 20% of all Canadians. So if you take 20% of our tax revenue, which is another category, that's $3 million. We generally collect about 15 million in tax. If 20% of the people can't pay or pay late and don't pay in 2020, that's a 3 million hit on the tax side. So you got 3 million in loss on the revenue side.
I would actually think it's probably higher than 20, because the 7 million.
That's right. I'm being conservative.
Because the working population, that's a percentage of the overall population, whereas the working population is smaller.
That's right.
So the question I would have is, what expenditures would you think should be reviewed then, in light of what you've talked? Obviously revenues are down. We all know. I missed my hockey season here too, my last few games here, and really that was a hard thing for everyone. I played I think the last game at the arena there in Elora. But what expenditures would you like to see reviewed? Obviously,
there are many. I mentioned the Works Garage. That needs to be placed on hold in the 2020 budget. And I noted that we did meet in May, and there's $1.1 million in new vehicles that are proceeding. There's 8 or 10 vehicles that we're going to purchase, notwithstanding COVID-19. And I was, rough figures, we're into 6 million in lost revenue out of that 30. And, that we're going to buy $1 million worth of vehicles and proceed with the new operations center. I think that those are bad decisions. Those are 2 easy ones. Another, I think, was a terrible one was recently at Bellside Cemetery. I spoke about this. It was reported as well in the media. We proceeded with putting in footings in the cemetery. This is a minor one. It's a $40,000 expense, but we could have, the cemetery was already mapped out into graves, and we proceeded with grading that cemetery hill in Block D at Bellside Cemetery. I think that was a complete waste of money and time. We already had graves we could have used. That was a decision that has declenched or triggered a full project of renovating Block D. And this is water under the bridge now, but we hired a consultant to study Block D of the cemetery at a cost of $100,000, and they were studying an already surveyed cemetery, and their finding was that we should grade out the hill, in such a way that we'd end up with 300 fewer graves than what we had initially. So there's $1 million in lost revenue from lesser quantity of graves. $1 million of expense to do the entire project, and we started on just phase 1 of that project with grading the easternmost part of Block D. But nevertheless, we've opened the door to $1 million loss in revenue, having fewer graves, and $1 million of expense to do it. And that's absurd, Mike. And we did that a few days after the emergency was declared. We started it.
So on that note, okay, those are, again, another very good example. What about, this is not a loaded question, what about staff and salaries and costs like that? Are you happy the way that's been handled, or what that's,
Yeah, that's a difficult one, Mike.
Yes.
We did a number of things which were good. We did not hire our summer staff. Normally we hire about a dozen young people to cut lawns in the parks. We didn't do that this year. We also did not hire some of the part-time staff in the summer, and we kept the full-time staff rolling. And some of them are redeployed. Some of the full-time rink staff, for example, are cutting parks, and that's a good use of our resources. And we want to be a top choice employer.
Good.
So we've done that by keeping our key staff, and that's a good thing. It's a very difficult problem.
Yeah, I've personally seen many of the staff redeployed, and that's encouraging too. And happy for them to be there. So, okay, well, you've covered some very big things. Obviously, the priority that I'm hearing and heard from others, like from other councillors, Kittredge and McElwain as well, is that the budget, I would say the biggest issue I'm hearing out of this is a budget review, is what you would really like to have and have that done very soon. And I don't really need much more comment. I think you've made, is that true? That's really, if you could pick one item that you could grab right now, that would be it?
Well, and it rolls up to not meeting and delegating our power to the CAO. We should be meeting frequently, and we should be redoing our budget, and the province gave us the right to do that for a reason, and we ought to be using it. And we need to provide oversight, and we need to represent the public. And we can't do any of those things if we're not meeting, including reviewing our budget.
Oh, I agree. Yes. That was without saying that with more council meetings. But the one big action would be to review the budget. That would probably be your first big request. Right.
Yes, it is. So
when you're how do you feel when in council meetings? This is just I kind of was thinking this the other day. It's a difficult job being a municipal councillor. I don't think people understand the amount of hours councillors put in. The amount of, if you want to be a good one, you got a good councillor. You've got to read a lot. You have to do research, and
yes, you do.
There's a tremendous amount of back end work that goes into some of these meetings that people don't understand. But how about interaction during council meetings? They're obviously they're a business meeting, but would you like to see more humor or a bit more casual and icebreaker things going on to make the team feel more cohesive, or any ideas on that front? Because to sort of make them more friendly, maybe, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Any thoughts on that?
Well, council should be a place for rigorous debate, and questions should be encouraged rather than squelched. And that I think is part of our, I think everyone knows there's been some difficult times on council, but we should be encouraging rigorous debate, and that's what I would like to see. I mentioned I've more than once I've asked a question, and the head of council has ruled my question out of order. When that perplexes me.
Yeah, I created a monster for my son when he was in grade school, and he was always known as the questioner, because I told him, you're going to be in an educational facility, and I want you to go to school knowing that there's no such thing as a bad question.
As a bad question.
If it's asked respectfully. So,
and yes.
And then I would, and with rigorous debate can often come great opportunity where you discover commonalities with the person you might be debating with that might not otherwise happen. Would that be a safe thing to say?
Yes, yeah. And in general, council does, it does work reasonably well. Like, I like all the councillors. I have no animosities against anyone. I try to speak my mind freely, and I try to raise important issues. And sometimes we often agree, and many votes are unanimous. And occasionally we disagree, and that is a forum where that type of healthy dialogue needs to take place.
That's right.
And it needs to be encouraged, actually.
So on that,
we may not always agree, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, No, disagreement is opportunity, and
That's right.
it probably would be a bad sign if every vote was unanimous. There's lots of countries
Well,
that have there's lots of countries that have unanimous votes all the time.
yes,
And we know what that,
and we have many of them.
right.
But
So
one of the key roles, Mike, of council is that everybody has a chance to speak, and more importantly, countervailing points of view need to be heard, and they need to be heard loud and clear so they can be considered. And that's not happening.
So on that front, I want to ask you though, public delegations, public participation, what would you like to see to help engage the public more? How would you like the public yourself to telling them directly now? You know, how would you like to see them engage themselves more? What ideas do you have for that?
Well, I encourage members of the public to speak to council. You can register as a delegation on pretty much any agenda item. I think that's to be encouraged. A good recent example, 3 or 4 months ago, pardon me, 6 months ago now, was the termite, the issue of termites. And we had an excellent delegation speaking to the issue. And I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more citizens come and speak to council about issues that are important to them. So those official delegations need to be encouraged.
Now, can a councillor aid in a delegation? Can they assist someone that's bringing an issue forward? Like saying, I'll help you become a delegate, I'll help you get through the process or anything like that. Is there any way that you can assist? Because, I mean, that's how I remember.
Yes, I'd be happy to assist anyone who wants to speak and giving them, I can't help them when they're actually doing it, but
No.
we can certainly discuss the matter beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk them through how it works, and I'd be very happy to do that. I did have a discussion with Tammy Rutherford, explaining the process and what she could expect to see. So that, because it takes some courage to come to council and speak. You know, not everyone's comfortable speaking in public. So I'm always happy to help someone who wants to know what it would be like to do that, to speak about the process or to give them, some assistance that if they need it.
So that's good.
It's an important part of the democracy that you come and speak to your elected representatives.
Well, that's good to hear, Bob. You're on the record now, and that's good that people could reach out to you if there's an issue they want to talk about, and you'll help assist them get there. That's really good.
Yeah, absolutely, I will. That's one of the best parts of being a councillor is helping citizens. That's something that's the best part, quite frankly, Mike.
We're going to wrap up. Yeah, thank you for that. And we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. So I just thinking out future-wise, any certain goals that you have and during this term that you would like to see, some things, personal accomplishments that you want to bring forward, or things that you would like to see happen in through this next term of council? Well,
I'd like to see us, there's two things that come to mind, Mike, and one is, you know, when I studied business at Laurier and working in sales and marketing and later in government, I think of how successful organizations are always focused on their main businesses or we used to call it their business lines. And for a township or for a municipality, the question becomes, what are our main functions and roles? And for me, Mike, our main functions and roles are to provide infrastructure. And so our main business lines are roads and pipes and recreation. Those are three of the most important roles we play. And we need to focus on those core lines. And so I'm really speaking about infrastructure renewal. Across the province, cities and towns all have, we haven't kept up, quite frankly, Mike, with roads, bridges, pipes, and we need to do a better job with that, renewing our aging infrastructure. The second thing I'd like to see, and most importantly to me, is I'd like to see the township be a high-performance organization that's focused on citizen service. And I don't think we're there. And we have to think about who we work for. And we work for the citizen. And everything we do should be focused on the citizen. And we're not doing that. And that's maybe my background is sales, is who is your customer? Who is your client? And for us, that's the citizens and the taxpayers. And we need to be focused on citizen service and the best bang for the taxpayer buck. And those are always going to be my goals. How to get better bang for our dollars publicly, and how can we best serve the citizen?
Well, I think those are very powerful words, and I think a lot of people will be encouraged to hear that. So let's end on this note, Bob. Just tell everybody what you love about this community and the township, and what is it that fills you with joy or reassurance or hope and all sorts of things. You know, you've lived here a long time. You know a lot of people. Well, tell us some of the things that you love about this area, even not just Center Wellington, the area in general, but what keeps you going?
Well, you know, one of the best things we have, Mike, is we've got the city at the front door. That's Toronto, Mississauga, Kitchener, Guelph. So you can participate in you know, professionally in the opportunities there for jobs and such. And we got the country at our back door. We've got the farming district, important part of rural Ontario right at our back door. We've got Lake Huron just a couple hours north. We've got amazing festivals and lots of good stuff going on locally. You know, when I was a boy growing up, Mike, it was even hard to get a part-time job here. We didn't even have a McDonald's. So there's substantially more opportunities now for young people. A lot of my high school graduating class, we had to leave for jobs, for school, and so on, and a lot of them didn't come back. And that's not the case now. So I'm excited about that. There's a lot more opportunity for young people. Great. We never had. I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, we had Blue Rodeo. A very, very good band right here in Aurora. That was amazing. We never had such things in the 70s and 80s. You had to go to the city for those things. So good stuff going on.
I can declare a conflict of, or a focus interest. I'm one of the organizers at Riverfest Aurora, who brought.
I guess I should have known that. But
you know, it's heartbreaking for us that the festival is not going forward. Also, there's the Scottish Festival. There's all sorts of things that aren't happening that is really hurting the community, I know, because it brings people together and celebrates this beautiful area, because everyone leaves, you know, the Grand River Valley and area being awed, you know, in awe of how gorgeous it is. So any other final thoughts, Bob, that you'd like to end with before we say goodbye to the audience? And this will be recorded and be put back up for future viewing, so don't worry about that. So anything you'd like to conclude on? This is your show and your end here.
Well, I've enjoyed having an interview, Mike, and I want to encourage Ward 3 citizens and all citizens, quite frankly, to reach out to me via telephone. I'm old school, and you don't solve problems over email and on a website. You have to talk. So I encourage people, if you want to reach out to me and talk about municipal matters, feel free to do so. You can find my coordinates on the town website, and Ward 3, my telephone and email. And I prefer telephone. I like to talk to people. You understand the issues that they're thinking of more clearly. So please reach out to me anytime you want to talk about municipal matters.
All right, Bob.
In our community. I look forward to those calls.
Well, that's good to know, and make sure people go to the Center Wellington Township, and you can find all the councillors' information, mayor and councillors' information there. It's very clear, very accessible. You just even have to Google Center Wellington Township councillor, and it all shows up.
It's important to me, Mike. It's important to me to represent people well, and I need to hear from you in order to represent you well.
And that's what this series is all about, to get the voice out there and direct access so that you can speak to whomever wishes to contact you and vice versa. So Bob, thanks very much for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
Gorgeous day, and get out there and enjoy that lovely sunshine. And we really thank you again for participating. And next week, we're hoping to have a discussion on food with some foodies. And we'll be talking about that hopefully next week, and we'll schedule that up on the board. So thanks again, Bob. And
thank you, Mike. I enjoyed having a discussion with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Okay, bye-bye, Bob.
Bye-bye.